I, 22F, have been living with my older sister Tamara, 25F, for the past 6 months. Our family history is complicated, to say the least. Our parents, Claire, 48F, and Patrick, 50M, got married young. They were high school sweethearts who tied the knot right after graduation. They had Tamara when Mom was 23 and me when she was 26. From what I remember and what I've been told, things were okay for the first few years. Dad worked as an accountant while Mom stayed home with us kids. We lived in a small house in the suburbs, nothing fancy but comfortable enough. I have vague memories of family picnics in the backyard and movie nights cuddled up on the couch. But as we got older, the cracks in their relationship started to show. Dad was always working late, trying to climb the corporate ladder. Mom felt isolated and unfulfilled, stuck at home with 2 young kids. They started arguing more and more, about money, about household chores, about how to raise us. I remember many nights lying awake in bed, listening to their muffled shouting from downstairs. When I was about 6, Mom decided to go back to school to finish her degree. She dropped out of college when she got pregnant with Tamara, and I think she felt like she'd missed out on following her own dreams. Dad wasn't supportive of the idea at first. He complained about the cost and who would take care of us kids. But Mom was determined. For the next couple of years, our house was chaos. Mom was juggling classes and studying with taking care of us. Dad was working even longer hours to pay for her tuition. Tamara and I spent a lot of time with our grandparents or after-school programs. The arguments between our parents got worse and more frequent. Things came to a head when Mom graduated and got a job offer in a city about an hour away. She wanted to take it, saying it was a great opportunity. Dad refused to consider moving, saying his whole career was here. They fought bitterly about it for weeks. In the end, Mom took the job anyway. She'd commute the hour each way, leaving early in the morning and getting home late at night. We hardly saw her during the week. Dad was angry and resentful, feeling like Mom had chosen her career over her family. This went on for about a year before they finally decided to divorce. I was 8 and Tamara was 11. They tried to keep things civil for our sake, but there was so much bitterness and hurt feelings on both sides. They fought over everything: custody arrangements, division of assets, child support payments. After the divorce was finalized, we lived primarily with Mom. She'd moved to a small apartment in the city where she worked. Dad stayed in our old house. We'd see him every other weekend and for a few weeks in the summer. It was a big adjustment for everyone. At first, Mom threw herself into her new job, and seemed happier than she'd been in years. She'd take us to museums or parks on the weekends, trying to make up for lost time during the week. But as the months went by, I could tell she was struggling. She was working long hours to prove herself at her new job, plus taking care of 2 kids on her own. She started looking tired and stressed all the time. That's when Simon, 51M, entered the picture. Mom met him at a work conference when I was about 13. He was charming and attentive, always bringing her flowers or little gifts. At first, it was nice to see Mom smiling and laughing again. But looking back, I can see how quickly he started to take over her life. Within a few months of dating, Simon was spending most nights at our apartment. He'd cook dinner and help us with homework, playing the role of perfect boyfriend and surrogate dad. But there was always something off about him that I couldn't quite put my finger on. He'd make little comments that undermined Mom's confidence, critiquing her cooking or the way she dressed. He'd question her parenting decisions in front of us kids. If Mom wanted to go out with her friends, he'd guilt her about leaving him alone. Slowly but surely, Mom started to change. She stopped seeing her friends as much. She deferred to Simon on decisions about the household or our schedules. She seemed anxious and on edge a lot of the time, like she was walking on eggshells around him. By the time I was 15, Mom had moved in with Simon and we barely saw her anymore. Tamara and I ended up living full-time with our dad after that. It was a big adjustment, but Dad really stepped up and did his best to take care of us. He'd always been the more distant parent, focused on work, but now he was making a real effort to be involved in our lives. We'd try to call Mom or visit, but Simon always seemed to interfere. He'd answer her phone, say she was busy, or make excuses for why we couldn't come over. The few times we did see Mom, she seemed like a shell of her former self, quiet, anxious, and always deferring to Simon. This went on for about 3 years. Tamara went off to college when I was 16, so it was just me and Dad for my last 2 years of high school. I missed my mom terribly during that time, but I was also angry at her for choosing Simon over us. I hear snippets from family members that things weren't good between Mom and Simon, but she refused all offers of help. I threw myself into school and extracurricular activities, trying to distract myself from the mess of my family life. I joined the debate team and discovered I had a real passion for public speaking. I also started volunteering at an animal shelter, which was a great stress relief. Dad was supportive of my activities, even if he didn't always understand them. He'd sit through my practice debates and drive me to the shelter on weekends. Finally, when I was 18 and about to graduate high school, Mom showed up at our door one night. She was a mess, crying, bruised, and clearly terrified. She told us that Simon had been abusing her for years and she'd finally worked up the courage to leave. Dad let her stay with us while she got back on her feet. It was a difficult time as we all tried to reconnect and process everything that had happened. Mom was dealing with severe trauma and depression. She'd flinch at loud noises and have panic attacks. I was angry and hurt, feeling like she'd abandoned us for years. Dad was trying to be supportive while also maintaining boundaries. Over the next few years, Mom slowly started to heal and rebuild her life. She got her own apartment, started therapy, and worked on repairing her relationships with me, Tamara, and the rest of the family. Things between us were strained at first, but gradually improved. I went off to college, choosing a school a few hours away. It was a relief to have some distance from all the family drama. I studied communications and political science, still passionate about debate and public speaking. I made new friends and even had my first serious relationship. Meanwhile, Tamara had graduated college and started her career as a software engineer. She'd always been the more level-headed one in the family, focused on her goals and not getting too caught up in the emotional turmoil. We'd talk on the phone regularly, commiserating about our parents and sharing updates on our lives. By the time I finished college last year, things with Mom were in a much better place. We could have conversations without arguing, and I'd even started enjoying our time together again. She seemed stronger and more like her old self. Which brings me to the current situation. I moved in with Tamara 6 months ago when I got a job at a nonprofit in her city. At first, everything was great, we've always been close and it was fun living together as adults. We'd cook dinner together, binge-watch TV shows, and go out exploring the city on weekends. But about 2 months ago, I noticed Tamara seemed distracted and was constantly on her phone texting someone. She was being weirdly secretive about it, which isn't like her at all. She'd hide her screen when I walked by and would step out of the room to take calls. Last week, I finally asked her what was going on. After some prodding, she admitted she'd been talking to a guy she met on a dating app. They hadn't met in person yet due to conflicting schedules, but had really hit it off and were planning to meet soon. I was happy for her and asked to see a picture of the guy. As soon as Tamara showed me his profile, my stomach dropped. It was Simon. He looked a bit older, but it was unmistakably him. I felt like I was going to be sick. I told Tamara who he was and what he'd done to our mom. She was shocked and upset, saying she had no idea. Apparently Simon had been using a different name on the app and hadn't mentioned anything about his past. Tamara was horrified and said she'd block him immediately. I was relieved at first, but then Tamara hesitated. She said that while she believed me, the Simon she'd been talking to seemed so different from how I described him. She wanted to meet him in person to confront him about his past and get closure. I begged her not to, telling her how dangerous he could be. But Tamara insisted she'd be careful and meet him in a public place. Against my better judgment, I agreed not to tell Mom about the situation yet. Tamara promised to let me know exactly where and when she was meeting Simon so I could be nearby just in case. She met up with him yesterday at a coffee shop. I waited anxiously at a nearby restaurant, ready to intervene if needed. Tamara came home a few hours later looking shaken. Apparently Simon had admitted to dating our mom, but claimed she was the abusive one and he was the victim. He spun this whole story about how Mom had isolated him and been physically and emotionally abusive. He even had photos of injuries he claimed Mom had inflicted. I was furious and told Tamara it was all lies. But I could see the doubt in her eyes. She said she needed time to process everything and figure out what to believe. I'm terrified that Simon has managed to manipulate her already. I don't know what to do now. Should I tell Mom what's going on? Confront Simon myself? Try to convince Tamara he's lying? I'm scared of losing my sister to this man who already stole years with our mother. Any advice would be appreciated. Update 1, it's been about a week since my last post and unfortunately things have only gotten more complicated. I really appreciate all the advice and support from everyone who commented. After a sleepless night wrestling with what to do, I decided to tell my mom what was going on despite Tamara begging me not to. I couldn't shake the feeling that Mom needed to know, both for her own safety and to potentially provide insight that could help Tamara see the truth about Simon. I invited Mom over for coffee, planning to break the news gently. But as soon as she walked in and saw my face, she knew something was wrong. I barely got through explaining before she completely broke down. She alternated between sobbing uncontrollably and having panic attacks. She kept saying she couldn't go through it all again and that Simon would ruin our lives. I felt awful for causing her so much distress, but I still think she needed to know. Once Mom calmed down a bit, she shared some details about her relationship with Simon that she'd never told us before. Apparently, his abuse wasn't just physical, he'd systematically isolated her from friends and family, controlled their finances, and convinced her that she was crazy and worthless without him. Hearing these details made me even more worried about Tamara. I could see how easily Simon could manipulate someone, especially if they didn't know his history. Mom begged me to keep Tamara away from him, saying she'd do whatever it took to protect us. The next day, Tamara found out I'd told Mom. She was furious with me, saying I'd betrayed her trust and overreacted. We had a huge fight where she accused me of being overdramatic and trying to control her life. She insisted that Simon had changed and that I was unfairly judging him based on the past. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was like Simon had completely brainwashed her in just a few meetings. I tried to tell her about the additional things Mom had shared, but Tamara wouldn't listen. She said Mom was exaggerating and that I was naive for believing everything without question. Things got even worse when Tamara announced she was moving out to live with a friend. She said she couldn't stay with me if I was going to interfere in her life and relationships. I pleaded with her to reconsider, reminding her of how close we've always been and how much I care about her. But her mind was made up. She moved out 2 days ago and has barely spoken to me since. I'm absolutely heartbroken. Tamara and I have always been a team, supporting each other through our parents' divorce and all the drama with Mom and Simon. I feel like I'm losing my sister all over again, just like we lost Mom all those years ago. Dad has been incredibly supportive through all of this. When I called him crying after Tamara moved out, he offered to come stay with me for a while. Part of me wants to take him up on it. I could use the support and it would be nice not to be alone in the apartment. But I'm also worried it might make things more tense with Tamara if she thinks I'm turning the whole family against her. To make matters even more complicated, I got a message from Simon yesterday. He said that Tamara had told him everything and that he wanted to meet with me to explain his side of the story. He claims to have evidence that will prove Mom was the abusive one in their relationship. I haven't responded yet. Part of me wants to hear him out just to understand what lies he's feeding Tamara, but I'm also scared of falling for his manipulation myself. What if he's able to twist things and make me doubt everything I thought I knew? I don't trust myself to see through his lies if he's as manipulative as Mom says. I'm also worried about Mom's mental health through all of this. She's been calling me multiple times a day, frantic about Tamara's safety and begging me to do something. I've tried to convince her to focus on her own healing and let me handle things with Tamara, but she's spiraling. I'm considering reaching out to her therapist to see if they can help. Work has been a struggle too. I can barely focus on anything, constantly checking my phone for messages from Tamara or worrying about what's happening. My boss has noticed my distraction and asked if everything is okay. I'm not sure how much to share. I don't want to bring my personal drama into the workplace, but I also might need some flexibility if things continue to escalate. I'm at a total loss for what to do next. Mom is a mess, Tamara won't speak to me, and Simon is trying to worm his way back into our lives. How did everything fall apart so quickly? I'm starting to question if I did the right thing by interfering at all. Maybe I should have just kept my mouth shut and let Tamara figure things out on her own. I don't know anymore. Update 2. It's been about a month since my last update and I'm still struggling to process everything that's happened. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet with Simon to hear his side of the story. I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to understand what he was telling Tamara if I had any hope of getting through to her. I took precautions for the meeting. I brought a friend with me for safety and have a witness to whatever he said. We met at a busy cafe in broad daylight, and I made sure several people knew where I was going. The meeting was intense, to say the least. Simon came prepared with a folder full of evidence, photos, texts, and even police reports that he claims prove Mom was abusive to him. Some of it was pretty damning: pictures of injuries, messages where Mom threatened him, a police report where neighbors called about a domestic disturbance and Mom was listed as the aggressor. He told a story of Mom being unstable and violent, saying she'd fly into rages and attack him. He claimed she was jealous and possessive, isolating him from friends and family. According to Simon, he stayed as long as he did out of fear and a misguided hope that he could help her. I left the meeting feeling completely shaken and confused. Could it be possible that we'd all misjudged the situation? That Mom had manipulated us into believing she was the victim when she was actually the abuser? I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence seemed compelling. I decided to do some digging of my own. I reached out to family members and old friends who had known Mom and Simon during their relationship. The stories I heard were mixed. Some people said they'd witnessed Mom acting erratically and aggressively towards Simon. Others insisted Simon was controlling and had isolated Mom from everyone. My Aunt Jane, Mom's sister, told me about incidents where Mom had shown up at her house in the middle of the night, drunk and ranting about Simon. But she also said Simon would call, constantly checking up on Mom's whereabouts and seemed to monitor her phone. An old neighbor recalled the police being called to their house multiple times for shouting matches, but couldn't say who was the aggressor. Mom's old co-worker mentioned that Mom often came to work with bruises she tried to hide, but also said Mom would have explosive temper tantrums in the office. In the midst of all this, Tamara announced that she and Simon were officially dating. She said she understood my concerns but that she was an adult and could make her own decisions. She asked me to respect her choice and give Simon a chance. I was torn between wanting to support my sister and feeling sick at the thought of that man being in our lives again. Mom found out about Tamara dating Simon and completely lost it. She showed up at Tamara's new apartment screaming and threatening both of them. The police were called and Mom was taken in for a psych evaluation. She's currently in a treatment facility for her mental health. Dad flew in when he heard what happened. He's been trying to mediate between everyone, but it's a mess. He's angry at Simon for coming back into our lives, worried about Mom's mental state and frustrated with Tamara for getting involved with Simon in the first place. I'm feeling so lost and conflicted. The Mom I thought I knew doesn't align with the stories and evidence I'm hearing. But I also can't shake my gut feeling that Simon is bad news, despite his apparent proof to the contrary. Tamara seems happy with him, but I'm terrified history will repeat itself. I've been having trouble sleeping and my work performance is suffering. My boss pulled me aside last week to ask if everything was okay. I broke down and told her a vague version of what's been going on. She was understanding and gave me some time off to deal with family issues. I don't know who or what to believe anymore. My family is falling apart and I feel powerless to stop it. I'm considering moving back in with my dad just to get some distance from this whole mess. I never thought I'd say this, but I almost wish I'd never found out about Tamara and Simon in the first place. Ignorance really was bliss. Update 3. It's been about 2 months since my last update and I'm still reeling from everything that's happened. I ended up moving back in with my dad temporarily to get some space and clear my head. Being away from the situation has given me some much-needed perspective. After a lot of soul-searching and conversations with my therapist, I've come to a difficult decision. I need to step back from trying to manage this situation. I realize now that I can't control Tamara's choices or force her to see things my way. All I can do is be there for her if and when she needs me. I've had several long talks with Mom since she was released from the treatment facility. She's doing better now and has admitted that she wasn't entirely honest about her relationship with Simon. While she maintains that he was abusive, she also acknowledges that she lashed out physically at times and said hurtful things. The truth, as usual, seems to be somewhere in the middle of both stories. Mom's been working with her therapist to process everything and take responsibility for her own actions. She's also started attending AA meetings, admitting that alcohol played a big role in her volatile behavior during that time. It's been hard to hear, but I'm proud of her for facing her demons. Tamara and I have started to repair our relationship slowly. We're not as close as we once were, but we're talking again. She knows I don't approve of her relationship with Simon, but she's asked me to trust her judgment. It's hard, but I'm trying. We've agreed to a don't ask, don't tell policy about Simon for now. When we talk, we focus on other aspects of our lives. As for Simon, I've made it clear to both him and Tamara that I want nothing to do with him. I won't try to sabotage their relationship, but I also won't pretend to be okay with it. Tamara seems to accept this for now. She's promised to be careful and to reach out if she ever feels unsafe or uncomfortable. Dad has been my rock through all of this. He's let me stay with him as long as I need, even though I know it's an adjustment having his adult daughter back home. We've had some good talks about family, relationships, and dealing with difficult situations. I feel like I understand him better now than I ever have before. I'm focusing on my own life and healing now. This whole ordeal has brought up a lot of old trauma and family issues that I need to work through. I'm in therapy and trying to build a life for myself outside of all this drama. I've started volunteering at the local animal shelter again, which has been a great stress relief. Work has been understanding about everything. I'm back full-time now and throwing myself into projects. It feels good to have something to focus on that's completely separate from my family issues. It's not the resolution I hoped for, but I'm learning to accept that I can't fix everything or everyone. All I can do is take care of myself and be there for my family as best I can. It's a daily struggle, but I'm taking it one day at a time.